Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and welcome to a bonus Storytime Interlude for the Storms of Ixia 40k narrative campaign. And this is just where we go more into the background of certain aspects of this narrative campaign. So you could actually completely skip this and you wouldn't necessarily miss anything to the main story. This just adds more depth to the things that are currently fighting in there, for the most part. Today we're going to talk about the history of the Hive Fleet Charon. Now, so far we've seen the Hive Fleet Charon in one other narrative campaign. The very first narrative campaign that we ever did, the Fate of Fyum, which was a Necrons versus Tyranids campaign. But their story starts a little before then. You see, Hive Fleet Charon is actually a splinter fleet off of Hive Fleet Kraken, hence their color scheme being similar, but not exactly the same. And Hive Fleet Kraken invaded the Imperium quite a while ago, and they were different than Behemoth in that they splintered out right away into a lot of forces covering over 1,000 light years of distance. So it was just impossible to coordinate a full-scale resistance to it. So instead the Imperium had to just kind of concentrate on key worlds and key systems. And so there's the big battle for Ixia 4, where Kraken was held off by the Ultramarines. And then of course there was the also large battle at the craft world Iyanden, where the Eldar managed to hold off the Tyranids, but at major losses to themselves, including a lot of the Spirit Stones and even an Avatar, and of course a lot of lives of Eldar, which are irreplaceable, really. But this splinter, after the Eldar craft world defeated the Kraken splinter in their area, Hive Fleet Charon was born from that. So basically it's a fleet that kind of took off away from the Eldar. So I had experience against the Eldar, but was beaten by them in the end. And so on its retreat, the first contact it really made with an enemy after that, they were drawn to the planet of Fyum by a gene stealer infestation there. So they knew that since the gene stealers were infesting it, there must be enough biomass there. Unfortunately for them, it wasn't the best pick to try to regain strength, because fighting against Necrons is it's a battle of attrition, because you can't eat Necrons. They're living metal, which the Tyranids don't know, thankfully, how to ingest. And can you imagine if they could ingest living metal? That would be horrifying. So they can't ingest it, and so they can't replenish their reserves. Now, thankfully for them, this tomb world of Fyum was just reawakening right now. So for the millions of years after they went back underground into stasis, the world managed to grow a lot of vegetation and even had a new native species evolve on it. It's just an indigenous life form that's totally it's just still, it's pre-industrial era pretty much, or around industrial era. So there's lots of biomass for them to eat. But when they arrive at this planet and start to fight, of course, Necrons, they started to awaken and fight, and they're led by Overlord Sobek at first to go against these Tyranids. And the Necrons had never seen the Tyranids before, and this huge battle for the planet actually ensued. And in the end, Sobek was killed, but there was a lot of losses to the Hive Fleet. In fact, the Hive Fleet itself took losses as the Necrons boarded several of their ships, and one of them in particular, a notable fight by Overlord Kanum, as he managed to take out a Hive ship that turned out to be one of the main synapse nodes for the Hive Fleet. So totally slowed down their assault and made their assault less coordinated, and so they took even more losses than they would have liked to have been. So they're very inefficient in this. Eventually they destroyed or drove off all the Necrons from this world and consumed it, but it was at a net loss. So after this fight, the Hive Fleet Charon was actually weaker than when it started, and that's just not good. So they were slowly starving, and so they're just desperate for more biomass, and so they go seeking out easier targets. So they only would attack, just kind of erratically, they would attack worlds that were more underdeveloped, didn't really have the technology to resist them, so they're really easy prey. But the problem with that is, since they're underdeveloped, there was also less development of life on these planets, and there wasn't as much biomass. So they slowly started to build up their biomass again. But then they found a super biomass-rich target. In fact, according to the gene stealer infestations that they could sense, they detected a system that had 3 nutrient-rich worlds in it. And they just had to go and eat that. Their hunger was just too great to resist going in there and seeding this world and just consuming it. But before they could get there, as they came to the outskirts of that system, all of a sudden this random warp storm just erupts all around them, which is really weird because there's usually a shadow in the warp that's projected from them, and most warp activity is suppressed. But a powerful warp storm, this tears open right around this Hive fleet and actually envelops half of the fleet. So half of the ships all of a sudden just disappear into the warp. And the rest of the fleet realizes, through their instinctiveness, of course, that they're no longer big enough to take on a system that would have 3 planets worth of bile-rich areas. So they leave it. They leave the buffet banquet table because they know that they wouldn't be able to get through the security, if you want to look at it that way. And they go head off looking for other things. Now, what actually happened with the ships that got pulled into the warp is, well, we don't know what happened to all of them, but we know what happened to one of them. And that is, it got deposited onto the planet Ixia in the Imaldu system. Majorly damaged and had to go into hibernation, as we've already heard from the previous Storytime videos. Well, the Imaldu system happened to be not too far away from where the rest of the Hive Fleet was. It was one of the nearest ones. And so Hive Fleet Charon, sensing one of their ships, changed course to go and rescue that ship. Not really rescue, but more get it back, to, you know, stick their limb back and try to have it heal, because they realized that they had taken so many losses that any major threat, like just a passing ultramarine ship, could bring in enough reinforcements and finish off this splinter. And so they had to build back up, especially if they ever come across the Eldar again, or new threats like the Necrons that they faced for the first time. They weren't used to those ones yet. And so that's where they then, of course, come into the system of Imaldu and coming towards the planet Ixia, as we found out in our previous mission. Or, sorry, not our previous mission, as we will find out in our next mission. And so they're going to be on the outskirts there as Captain Wyzen detects them. But I'm not going to tell you any other than that. That is where we're going to leave it, because that's where the story finishes, and we got to continue it with this narrative campaign and possibly with future ones as well. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more Storms of Ixia narrative campaign. This Thursday we'll have another story time and 2 more missions, of course, just like we will have every Thursday, and the bonus ones every Tuesday until we are done this one. Thanks for watching. Happy wargaming.